Hi, this is Bits and Pieces, the official podcast of Component Supply. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're going to do a breakout segment that we're going to do every once in a while for various product lines. We're thinking about calling it There's No Such Thing as a Stupid Question, because even though there might be such a thing as a stupid question, the truth is we're trying to give information about our products and our capabilities to engineers and product designers that are in any phase of their career. So sometimes there might be a question that maybe seems kind of silly to you, or maybe one that you've known the answer for years and years. But for someone who's just starting out, these are real questions that we get. We went through our online chat data and looked at some of these questions that come up. Nothing super technical today, just kind of these bare bones questions. So we're excited to talk about this, to share some of these with you. So we're going to do it not really in a game format because
I would lose again.
No, because there are no winners and losers. Everyone's going to get a participation trophy. No, but really just because we're just providing information. Not everything has to be a competition, But yes, if it was, I would probably win. So let's get started. Do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Okay. So I get to ask you this question, and you have to answer it.
I do, but you're welcome to intervene if I'm going to lead the people astray.
Okay. Can you fabricate both ends of the tube?
Yes. We can fabricate both ends of a hypodermic tube.
Okay. Please explain. I'm having fun with this,
okay.
actually.
The caveat, I think, would be, I don't know if everyone realizes the requests that are asked of Component Supply, but sometimes we're asked to cut material very, very small. So that's the limitation. There is a certain length at which you can hardly hold the part, let alone fabricate both sides of it.
Right.
So I don't know. Do you know off the top what your...
We're going to try anything, right? If somebody wants us to try something, we just finished a job that we cut this material 9 thousandths long, and they wanted some radius on the end, and we are able to accomplish some of that within some reasonable parameters. Fabricating a tip grind or whatever with something that short is really, really difficult. So you've got to leave those parameters open. Once a part gets shorter than a half an inch, you're really struggling to not that you can't and create tooling for it, but you're struggling to somehow work hold that and do something on both sides of it.
So would you recommend to a new engineer to maybe reconsider your design if that's something, if you're working with a very short part and do you really need both ends fabricated? Is that kind of the question?
I would do that. And it is one of those things, it's like, sure, it just is expensive, right? You've become very labor intensive. It's a very manual process, because at that point you're having to deal with something both sides. You're gonna have to make tooling for it, yes. So if it's unnecessary, don't call it out, or work with us to define. If you need something on one end, you'd like something on the other end. Work with us to figure out what that limitation should be.
I love that you said we'll try. Yesterday, we do these Wednesdays at 8s with our team. We talked about them before. And yesterday, we had the opportunity to let everyone get to be on the marketing team for a little bit. And we were working on designing trade show stickers just out of, they got a brand kit with the colors and some phrases that we use. But then, they're welcome to run wild and think of their own things. And our Tennessee Tech intern wanted to do one that just said, we'll try it. Right. And I feel like that is the spirit behind prototyping and in the R&D space is our first response is typically we'll try if we haven't done it before.
I think usually we start with somebody says, can you do this? And our first response is generally like, how hard can it be, right?
Right.
And but then we start thinking about it. We're like, what's the worst that could happen?
But then we also ask them, do you really need it?
Yeah. Then we get into it and we're like, well, okay, we're doing our best here.
Yeah, we do kind of try to keep budget in mind.
Yeah.
When we're at the beginning phases of it, we don't want to put them in a box that makes it really expensive later.
For sure.
Even if we can do it, even if it's easy with 10 parts.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. Okay, your turn. Well, my turn to read. What lengths do you supply in hypodermic tubing?
Okay, I got this wrong earlier on in another podcast.
Yeah, it was embarrassing.
It was for me. So we do have like 30 and 60 inch links, which is generally how we stock it in. And then we have all these shortcut pieces, and I don't know them all, but there are lots of them. But for the most part, there's 30 inches, there's 60 inches, and then from like 3 inches down to a quarter inch, or maybe even smaller than that, an eighth inch. We have lots of, there may be 15 different links in those smaller sizes that are available.
Yeah, and you can buy just one of them.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be a volume. So our goal there, I think, is to let people experiment with different lengths, but also to kind of see a close-up view of our precision cutting capabilities. That we supply these burr-free. It's a very clean cut, so you get kind of a glimpse of what it would be if you. Right. I don't need a quarter of an inch. I need something more custom for a length, or I need a tighter tolerance. It kind of gives you an idea of what the work looks like, and then you feel more comfortable.
There were other customers, even in universities or even small projects or labs that. They didn't have a way to cut it well.
Right.
They probably didn't want a 1 inch piece or a 3/4 inch long.
They were going to buy a stick and cut it themselves.
They were going to try and figure something out, and they looked at it and they say, you know what? I only need 30 pieces. I can probably live with that, and it was close, and we got it close enough.
Right.
And so that was all of those things went into that, making those small pieces available.
Yeah, and it allows you to have a precision cut part. Without committing to a large volume, without having to wait a lead time, like we'll ship it tomorrow.
That's right, yeah.
At the point where you're ordering like 250 pieces or so, we would want to quote that because we can provide a better per piece price at a slightly larger volume.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're able to buy 1, 10, 50, 100, and we'll ship it tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
You're up.
Oh, all right, it's my turn. I need a size that I don't see on your website. Can I get a custom size?
Right, yeah. That's actually when we get a lot. We get either a request for, do you do custom sizes, or a request that, they provide a dimension. And so, we say, well, the closest we have in stock is this, but if an ID works, like if you find an ID in there that works, we can OD grind the tube so that you get the desired dimensions. We do also have some custom run options. I think you're better suited to answer that question than I am.
The custom side of the hypodermic tubing is difficult because you've got it's a drawing process, right? So you've got two aspects of it. You've got if it's not going to be plug drawn, you've got a strip material that you're stuck with, like that's the diameter of your strip. So it's then rolled and welded, and then it goes through this drawing process. It's going through a die to a particular diameter. You're talking about a size, range of material that's been around for 100 plus years.
Right.
It became very popular in the 60s, but it's been around much longer than that. And so those dies exist. Now all of a sudden you've asked for something that they've got to make a die for. If it's not strip material they can get, they've got to make a plug process. So now you've got the tooling to create that. Now you can run your tubing. Okay, that when you get to a custom size, it's the challenge got there and the volume needed to be there. I think we've got opportunities over the years where we've just been able to collect dies for that kind of stuff. That the custom side, I think we've kind of round that down to about 1,000 feet. You can get 1,000 feet custom material, and this is really just if you needed a custom ID. If you want an OD, just grind it. So if you find an ID that's pretty much going to work, let's just pick something that's got a larger outside diameter, and we'll grind that down. That is a much easier way to handle that. If you can't find an ID, now we're looking at a custom, a custom drawing process. That's where, like I said, the minimum is about 1,000 feet.
Right.
And I think we've gotten to where we can do that in about 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's gotten much faster than when you used to, send a quote for a custom tube, and it was,
It was not possible. You're looking at very expensive tooling process. The mill didn't want to do it.
So the minimum was really high.
The minimum was you're 50,000 feet.
Yeah. So it's a much better deal. So yeah, if you really do need it, we're a great option. We can figure that out for you, and it's not as cost prohibitive or time prohibitive as it used to be.
Yeah.
Okay. How many wall thicknesses do you supply?
We stock 4 wall thicknesses: regular wall, thin wall, extra thin wall, and ultra thin wall.
Yes. So can we just go on a trail for a second and talk about that? Because a lot of different organizations, a lot of different manufacturers, they will say regular thin, extra thin, ultra thin. But you have to be careful because the specs from manufacturer to manufacturer are not always the same.
That is right.
So occasionally we'll have someone that just says, hey, we need a thin wall, or usually it's more like I need an extra thin wall or an ultra thin wall tube. But they've seen the specs from another one and they call it an extra thin or something like that. And so we would recommend to any engineer starting out, don't get used to the wall thickness call out. Like that's a great description, but you really have to know your specs for it to work.
Yes.
For it to be consistent between manufacturers.
In a design standpoint, you should ignore wall thicknesses, the call out for a wall thickness, and simply use an outside diameter and an inside diameter spec. Especially if you're going to call it out on a drawing, because you don't want to say I need. Let's just say you looked at a particular mill from years ago, and they had what was called an extra thin wall. We just decided to use 2 extras. We were extra, and that's someone else's ultra thin wall. But another manufacturer had something very similar to that. That was their micro thin wall. They were all pretty much the same thing, and in some cases identical. They were just called something different, and so that while the gauge and kind of the ID, so the gauge from the outside diameter and the ID was consistent. What they called them in terms of the wall thickness, that was not consistent or controlled at all. And so I would love to say that we're the ones that make the rules.
Right. But even our thin wall, our thin wall can be just slightly different from another manufacturer's thin wall, even though we're calling it the same thing. Yes. So just be careful of that if you're just starting out. Always spec the critical dimensions.
Yes. Okay, it's my turn. Do you supply seamless hypodermic tubing? I'm so glad you got that.
So, no, I want you to answer this question. No, we do not supply seamless hypodermic tubing. Some might say that it doesn't exist, but I would.
Some might.
But I would argue that, I put that question into Chat GPT, and it told me that I could buy a seamless hypodermic tube. So when I brought that answer to you and you told me no,
So now you're putting me against AI today.
Yeah, and I'm like, if that's where you want to go, that's fine, because I know we're not supposed to trust blindly in AI, and I don't. But I think it's a good opportunity, a good reminder that AI is a tool like anything else, but it must be verified, because the people that have been working in the industry are not necessarily feeding data. So can you talk about that misunderstanding? I know it's my question. The answer is no, we don't supply seamless hypodermic tubing. But can you provide some
So we do not
there?
supply seamless hypodermic tubing. And in fact, I would argue that you cannot get seamless hypodermic. There is no such thing as seamless hypodermic tubing.
So many people are listening.
I know, and we'll probably get I'm not going to get the emails. You guys don't share them. You guys don't let me talk to the customers, so you'll feed that. But you go back, hypodermic tubing. The hypodermic tubing we see today, it became very, very popular, kind of in the 1960s. Prior to that, there's records of a hypodermic tubing device, if you will, used all the way back into like the 900s in Egypt. This is not a new process. The Birmingham wire gauge has been around a long time. Welded and drawn tubing has been around, a long time. But you kind of go back into early. If you go back to the 1800s, you're looking at they're gonna do the same process. They're going to roll the tubing. They're going to weld it. They're going to draw it to some size, but they don't care. They're not trying to make it look good, right? It's not doing anything. They're running something through it, but it's not about, and they're certainly not making it to the sizes that they are. Well, that is welded and drawing, to make a full hard tubing is really a good process to create a full hard product. So that is why it was kind of adapted into making what's used as hypodermic tubing today. So, but obviously you don't want it to look like some of the pipe that they made. So they're going to go through multiple draw processes. They're going to actually put a plug inside of it, and to get, one, the hardness they need, and two, the size that they need. So now, multiple processes of annealing and drawing to get it that size, you wind up with this really nice tube that the construction was welded and drawn. The look, the appearance, it's very difficult to see the weld line, especially even on the inside, because, like I said, it would be plug drawn. And so now you have this situation where you've got this tube that looks, from an appearance, it looks seamless. It is really difficult to see a weld line. And so I'm not surprised that AI picked that up, because people in the 60s particularly, they actually called it seamless tubing. So hypodermic tubing was sometimes just simply called seamless tubing, but that's because they were describing its appearance, not its construction.
Right.
And so the construction of hypodermic tubing is a welded and drawn process. It is not seamless, even though years ago they would call it that. They were describing the physical attributes, not the construction of the tubing. And so that's why I would say, one, I don't think you can technically get it. Now, Can you have somebody go out and manufacture a seamless tubing in that size? Yes. Can they go through a hardening process and get? Yes. I don't know why you would do that. That seems like a lot of work for the same thing.
I think occasionally they're worried about the weld line if they're worried about pressure. But again, if it's a hypodermic tubing application, usually that's not a primary concern.
That's right. Usually it's jumped over to some other industry, chromatography, something like that is worried about, a pressure rating, and probably should use a seamless tubing that has a pressure rating on it. Like a capillary tube or something like that that's got a heavy wall and is designed for those pressures. Hypodermic tubing is really not, though it might be used it can be used, it's really not designed for that.
It's interesting thinking about something being, kind of defined by the visual inspection, for component supplies history, early in my history with component supply, we had the opportunity to take a tour of a tubing mill and get the history and see some of that process in person. And we had the opportunity to be taken around by that company's quality manager at the time. And so it was really fun. Felt very, very friendly. And
quality managers don't usually do plant tours.
Yes.
That was unique.
Well, I think it was unique. I think we're also pretty small in the grand scheme of their customers. Right. And so he was so kind to take us and teach us. And, being the quality manager, we got to see, he probably spent more time on the inspection side than what we would have gotten otherwise. But I remember him saying, and we went through a period at Component Supply where we got this request for the scratch-free
or surface finish.
Some kind of surface finish visual inspection criteria. We don't see that quite as much anymore, but we go through these phases with these kinds of requests and questions, and we're looking through magnification at different levels. And he said he would get these same requests, scratchless hypodermic tubing, and he would joke, we can't give you scratch-free hypodermic tubing, but we can give you scratches for free.
Right.
And he was showing the different magnification. So at this magnification, to your
really
eye, it looks really good. There are no scratches, but the higher you get, you are going to see some scratches on hypodermic tubing. That is just the nature of it. So we do, at Component Supply, try and steer people away if they get into surface finish, unless it's like a really critical spec.
Yes.
Don't get into that. But it was a great tour and just a reminder of how much is a visual inspection, but that all depends on your magnification.
Yeah, appearance can change. You can actually set, standards.
Yeah. All right, I guess it's mine. What's the difference between 304 stainless steel and 316? Because we do supply both.
12. I did that. It's there forever.
Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you for that.
So obviously alloy, right? Yeah, 304 alloy, 316. One is more corrosion resistant. So jump to the marine application from that standpoint. When you look at boats that have screws on it holding things down, they will use a 316 stainless steel over a 304 because 304 will still oxidize in an environment like salt water or other corrosive environments. 316 is much more resistant to that. It's softer though, so if you need strength, you're going to give that up on the 316 side over the 304.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing something other than the difference, the numbers.
What capabilities do you have for hypodermic tubes?
Oh, we don't have enough time on the podcast to go into all of our capabilities.
Right.
We have so many. Well, I'm most excited.
Pick your 3 favorite.
Well, I'm most excited because we, have grown tremendously in our tip grinding capabilities, so we can provide, the precise bevels and lancets and whatever custom end.
Francine.
It's the sky's the limit with the tip grind. So those are really fun. I love. We have different times in our shop, dedicated to training, and we have operators that'll come very eagerly and show me on our desk what they experimented with, and it's so cool. It's like things that 10 years ago we would say no to. Yeah. It's so nice to just say, yeah, that's not a problem. When do you need it? Tomorrow?
Well, I look at, we have these days where they kind of set aside for kind of just the exploration days.
Yeah.
Where we build into the shop a day for everybody to go to kind of different stations that they don't typically, or different machines they're not fully trained on, they're partially trained on, and experiment. And they come back with stuff that it's not something anyone would ever ask for.
You say that, and tomorrow we will get the email.
I realize that, but it's crazy what they're doing.
Yeah.
With hypodermic tubes.
And it's such a short amount of time. Like I think the training is so strong. So that's the one that we're excited about. The one that we probably get the most requests on from a capabilities side is precision burr-free cutting. That's something that we get the most requests for, of all different gauge sizes, all different lengths, some really tight tolerances, and some really, almost microscopic lengths.
We are seeing more where people are using it as the mandrel for catheters. I think some of the sizes, but that's usually we're grinding that, and we're even grinding tapers into the slight tapers into the hypodermic tubing because they need a different size for whatever catheter they're working on. Yeah,
it seems like sometimes they've accomplished it with like a bushing, but if they can adjust the OD with a taper, that's another way. So that's really exciting, and of course we regularly do bending. Those are, I think, probably the big 3, right? And this is hypodermic tubing. It's also needles. We make custom needles, so we can we make like the custom cannula with whatever end you need, precision length, either gluing into a polypropylene hub or welded into a 316 stainless hub. So that's kind of the high level of the capability side. I love capabilities at Component Supply. I love how fast we are. I want to talk about it all the time.
Yes.
When do you need it? And I love challenging our team to we need it faster. They needed it yesterday. We can't do yesterday. We can do it today. How fast?
How fast?
Yeah. I'm sure the shop loves that too.
They do. Well, this is why we take those days and let them experiment so that they can be prepared for that.
We've got a good team.
Yes, we have a good team. Yeah. Okay, is it my turn?
No.
To read to you.
I had to explain capabilities. Okay. This is one that we get often. So I'm going to ask you this question and then a follow-up. Okay.
Oh.
What's the difference between the same part number, but one has a -30 at the end, and one has a -60 at the end? So this would be for 304 hypodermic tubing, you have an HTX dash, let's say a 6 gauge, 06 R for regular wall, and then you have a -30 and a -60.
Yeah, so that's just the stocking unit. We stack at 30 inches long or 60 inches long. We stock material here by the foot. So the HTX-06R, that part number represents technically 1 foot of material that sits in here. So if someone comes, the volume buyers who come in and say, I need, 20,000, 10,000, 6,000 feet, whatever, they're purchasing it at just the root number, what we call the root, HTX-06R. But if you buy a 30-inch piece, that's got the -30 at the end. If you've got a 60-inch piece, it's a -60.
Yeah. A lot of people like the 30-inch one just because it saves on shipping once you get over like 48 inches. Is that right?
From a shipping logistics standpoint,
Yeah.
48, literally it's 48 inches. If you are 48 and 1/8 of an inch, they are going to put you in a category that's insanely more expensive.
Right.
So, yes.
So if you're concerned about shipping costs at all, depending on where you are in your process or how big your organization is, you might consider if you don't need a 60-inch length, just get the 30.
And storing it. Like storing a 30-inch, if you don't have the facility or the whatever for it.
It's a little bit of a pain.
Yeah.
Is there anything I wanted to add to that? I feel like there was. Now I can't think of it. Oh, well, we'll have to do another podcast on hypodermic tubing. Okay.
Do you offer needle tubing?
That's why I was grabbing that one. Yes, we do. Because we would define it the same as hypodermic tubing.
Yes.
Right? We'll get, someone, they want a cannula, they want a needle, they want a hypodermic tube. To us, those all fall in the same bucket. It's kind of similar to the podcast we did earlier on like the difference between like a mandrel and a wire and a rod. Like we would say the wire is how we define for the most part, our, it doesn't have an ID. So it's a wire. The application or the use would be a mandrel. And so we feel similarly about hypodermic tubing. That's the material. The material is hypodermic tubing. And then your application would be whether it's a needle or a cannula.
Endoscope.
Yeah. So it does depend on. But when they ask needle tubing, we generally say yes and go ahead and ask for specs. I think that's it.
Well, I think sales gets confused too because they're not confused. They're someone will say, hey, I need a needle that's 1.25 inches long. And so the first question is, okay, is that in a plastic hub or a stainless
right, because
hub?
We think of needle as the complete
The needle is
assembly.
a needle, and in their mind it was just the tube. And so filtering through some of that is, I'm sure on their end they're like, "Why are you asking me that?" I'm just, and so that's sort of the semantics.
Yeah, and I think please don't think we're dumb. Like we just get a lot of questions on all sizes, on all parts of the spectrum, all sides. We have engineers that have been working with us for years and years and years, and they know what they want. They say the right things. We know their language. Like we know if they say this word, this is what they mean. But then we have new engineers coming, and we're kind of in a get to know you process. What language are you using? What phrases are you using? And so we might ask, again, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but we might ask what you think is a stupid question to try and make sure that we get it right from the beginning.
Well, we would hate to assume that they didn't want a hub, do all the work, based off of a description or a phone conversation, not a drawing.
Right.
And they actually wanted a true needle.
Right, because there is an assumption that maybe we get a drawing for every order. We really don't. I mean, I can't even describe how early in the process component supply is with all of these things. We get the phone call, we get the online conversation, we get a sketch, a napkin drawing, So they're so early on in the process that we don't always get that official, Rev 1 drawing. Right. So yeah, we're trying to figure it out with them. So that's all of the questions that we have. I know these were really what we kind of get on a daily basis with particularly, I think, new customers, haven't worked with component supply before. So thank you for choosing us for hypodermic tubing. We also, this is going to be my shameless plug. We have 10 hypodermic tubing lab kits. And so if you haven't stocked your shop with these yet, they're great. They represent different wall thicknesses, and we put them in like 9 or 10 inch lengths, and really just for you to test the specs for your application. You can just kind of keep them in your shop, and then as you need volume, or even like not volume, but like you need 10 pieces of the standard lengths, you can order those knowing for sure that you have the ID and OD that you need. So we love these. They're in stock. You can get these anytime. So we're gonna continue to do this every couple months. We'll just throw out some questions that we've gotten over a certain period of time about particular product lines and trying to equip you with everything that we can for that product. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, now go change the world.